Welcome to the SPR Site Safety Orientation. We invite you to embrace our attitude towards safety to ensure a safe work environment for all personnel. This training is intended to provide specific information regarding the SPR safety program, SPR site-specific safety information, and identify roles and responsibilities. Key components of the SPR safety program include the Accident Prevention Manual, the OSHA Voluntary Protection Program, OSHA Process Safety Management, DOE Integrated Safety Management System, and the Line Control Safety Program. This training will cover general safety topics regarding work at the SPR. Additional site-specific information will be provided when you arrive on site. Safer Together is the M&O's safety theme that reflects our commitment to a caring, preventative safety culture across our organization. Our core values are safety, integrity, teamwork, and excellence. We live by the highest ethical standards, we respect each other's perspectives, and we share knowledge and resources to achieve excellence. Join us in taking our safety pledge. We are one safety family. We're all responsible for safety. We speak up and we listen. We don't cut corners. We're proud of our safety achievements. We understand that safety impacts everything we do. We don't compromise on safety, ever. The M&O is responsible for providing a safe work environment during the operation of the SPR. All employees and contractors have the authority and responsibility to stop work if you see an unsafe activity or feel uncertain of safely performing the work. No work will resume until all stop work issues and concerns have been adequately addressed and rectified. Any form of retribution or intimidation directed at any individual or company for exercising their authority as outlined in this program will not be tolerated and may be cause for disciplinary action.
If you think something doesn't seem right, stop work. The appropriate supervision will step in and reevaluate the situation. Stop work is not only encouraged at the SPR, it's imperative for the safety of everyone involved.
All of us have stop work authority. It's not just our authority, it's our responsibility to protect ourselves and all the people we work with, both FFPO and our subcontractors.
At the SPR, safety is essential to the way we conduct business. Our goal is to protect our employees, subcontractors, clients, and others who could be affected by our activities. We hold ourselves and our subcontractors responsible and accountable for providing the financial, human, and organizational resources necessary to uphold our policy. Responsibilities of all personnel under the safety program include, but are not limited to, working safely, immediately correcting or reporting unsafe conditions, obeying all SPR rules, looking out for the safety of yourself and others, and a strong commitment to ensure that the environment is protected. Leadership responsibilities include, but are not limited to, accountability for all workers, ensuring employees are properly trained, setting a good personal example, conducting safe work planning and establishing safe work procedures, encouraging employees to effectively communicate and address safety concerns, and recognizing positive safety behaviors. A safe work environment is achieved by using a variety of safety processes. One important safety concept utilized across the SPR is the implementation of the hierarchy of controls. The M&O is required to implement ISMS per the Department of Energy Acquisition Regulation, or DEAR clause. ISMS helps to structure the safety program by utilizing multiple components which integrate safety into all phases of work. These components include the 7 guiding principles and the 5 core functions. The 7 guiding principles are line management responsibility for safety, clear roles and responsibilities, competence commensurate with capabilities, balanced priorities, identification of safety standards and requirements, hazard controls tailored to work being performed, and operations authorization. The 5 core functions are define the scope of work, analyze the hazards, develop and implement hazard control, ensure work is performed within controls, and provides for feedback and continuous improvement. Additional components of ISMS employed at the SPR is the creation of the Accident Prevention Manual, Emergency Management System, and Quality Management System. The SPR is required to comply with OSHA's Process Safety Management, or PSM, regulation because the SPR moves crude oil in quantities of 10,000 pounds or more and also stores crude oil under pressure. Proper execution of PSM helps to reduce the risk of fatalities, severe injuries, and property damage. All M&O and subcontractor employees are responsible for understanding PSM requirements to reduce the risk of catastrophic events. All 4 SPR sites were approved in the Voluntary Protection Program between 2000 and 2001 and still are to this day. Personnel are expected to perform in a manner that will continue to support the SPR's VPP status. A safe workplace results from the diligent combined efforts of management, employees, contractors, and subcontractors. Under OSHA regulations, both employers and employees have rights and responsibilities that are critical to the overall success of the safety program. By participation in the OSHA Voluntary Protection Program, the M&O assures that these rights apply to all M&O and subcontractor employees. All personnel shall comply with security requests. All personnel are subject to screening and search prior to entry on site per security, DOE, and M&O discretion. This includes, but is not limited to, personal luggage, bags, and vehicles. All personnel accessing the site must have a valid DOE-issued identification badge. Visitors and new employees will be issued a temporary badge to access the site and must be escorted at all times by a site representative. All sites have screening devices such as metal detectors, X-ray scanners, and security canines. Security awareness is paramount, and your awareness should include, at a minimum, report any suspicious activity. Do not film or photograph any of the facilities unless authorized. Report any film or photography of any of the facilities immediately. Do not allow anyone to use you to gain access to the facility or restricted areas. And do not lend your ID to anyone. Personnel shall only park in appropriate designated parking areas. Individuals that do not follow SPR rules will be subject to disciplinary actions up to and including termination, and in some cases arrest by law enforcement or detainment by site security. The following is a list of items and actions that are prohibited on all SPR sites: firearms and ammunition, explosives, dangerous weapons, controlled substances, pets and animals, alcohol, smoking, including vaping, cell phones in classified areas unless approved and noted on a hot work permit, and cell phone use while driving vehicles, horseplay and fighting, and willful violations of safety regulations. Personnel shall have proper training prior to performing specific job tasks while working on the SPR, such as confined space entry, lockout tagout, and operating equipment. Certain operations may require a competent or qualified person to perform the task. Supervisors are responsible for ensuring their employees are properly trained prior to conducting work. SPR sites utilize multiple types of signs to display warnings, accident prevention, and restricted/controlled areas. All personnel shall obey and abide by all signage. The SPR utilizes a variety of barricade tape to convey the appropriate level of hazard. Tags should be attached to the various types of barricade tape. These tags will display specific information regarding the hazards within the demarcated location. Rain, lightning, hail, flooding, tornadoes, and hurricanes are possible inclement weather events personnel may be exposed to while working at the SPR. During these events, appropriate actions shall be implemented to reduce the risk of injury, illness, environmental impacts, and property damage. Wildlife can be expected at each SPR location. The storage sites are home to a variety of reptiles, insects, and mammals, all of which can pose harm to personnel. In the event wildlife is encountered, employees are prohibited from handling wildlife and should notify their site ES&H representative. The SPR uses a variety of controls to ensure personnel remain safe while working in extreme temperatures, which include worker acclimatization, variable work schedules, fluid replacement, implementation of environmental monitoring, and personal heat stress monitoring / core body temperature monitoring. All personnel shall participate in heat and cold stress monitoring programs. All accidents, injuries, potential hazards, and hazard recognition, no matter how minor, must be reported. Injuries and illnesses, regardless of severity, shall be immediately reported to the control room operator. Anyone may call 911, but calling the CRO will result in a faster response. New Orleans and GSA warehouse personnel immediately report all injuries and illnesses to the Protective Force Security Contractor at extension 4321. The Protective Force Security Contractor notifies EMS if needed and will provide first aid CPR to the extent of their training while remaining with the affected personnel until medical response arrive. Dial 911 if on an internal line if a medical response is needed immediately. Employees at the Stennis warehouse shall call the Stennis Fire Department and then report to the New Orleans Operations Control Center. Work Care is a system used at the SPR to assist in the evaluation of an employee subjected to injury or illness as a result of an incident while working on the SPR. Work Care shall be contacted by calling 1-888-449-7787. All supervisors are required to complete and submit incident reports for all incidents. When contacting the CRO, provide details of the location, personnel involved, and any other important information associated with the emergency, incident, or injury. The CRO phone numbers will be provided to you once on site. First aid kits and AEDs are located at each SPR site. Providing first aid, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR, and the use of an AED and fire extinguisher shall only be done by individuals that have been trained to do so. Otherwise, the CRO shall be notified to initiate ERT. Site emergency response procedures contain information regarding procedures to be executed during events such as fire, medical emergencies, inclement weather, and security incidents. Personnel will be provided site-specific information by their site safety representative or designee. This information will include assembly point locations and emergency contact numbers. At all sites, the evacuation alarm is tested on a weekly basis. The alarm consists of one continuous blast with assisting audible instructions and sounds like this. In the event of an emergency, the control room operator will activate the evacuation alarm. All non-responders shall stop work immediately. If driving, the vehicle shall be pulled to the side of the road, turned off, and keys left in the ignition. Personnel shall follow instructions provided over the PA system and determine the wind direction from windsocks. Personnel shall then proceed to their primary or secondary assembly area by a safe route. Personnel shall proceed crosswind and upwind of the emergency or incident location. Additional instructions will be provided at the assembly area. The SPR utilizes the Global Harmonization System, National Fire Protection Association, Hazardous Materials Identification System, and the Department of Transportation Placarding to help communicate information for hazardous chemicals to employees. SCSs are available to all employees upon request and are available in the Technical Data Center. Subcontractors are responsible for maintaining a database of the SDSs for the chemicals in use and present on their job site. Even though brine water is not classified as hazardous or as a carcinogen, good hygiene and safety practices should be followed. Health hazards of brine water may include irritation of the skin, eyes, and respiratory tract. Crude oil is a flammable liquid. The vapors given off by crude oil are far more susceptible to ignition than the crude oil liquid. Crude oil contains petroleum hydrocarbons, methane, and metals, which may cause eye, skin, and lung irritation. Crude oil may contain significant quantities of hydrogen sulfide and benzene, a known carcinogen. An additional health hazard of crude oil is that it is a known teratogen that can cause birth defects and changes in fetal development. The target organs include hematopoietic blood-forming system, lymphatic system, nervous system, and reproductive system. Symptoms may include dizziness, rapid heart rate, headaches, confusion, and anemia. Benzene is a toxic component that is present in crude oil and has the following characteristics. It's a colorless liquid with a sweet odor in high concentrations, highly flammable, heavier than air and may sink into low-lying areas, and carcinogenic or cancer-causing. Severity of toxicity caused by benzene depends on the amount, route, and length of time of exposure, as well as age and pre-existing medical condition of the exposed person. Major long-term effects on blood include anemia, which causes bone marrow to not produce enough red blood cells, immune deficiency, and cancer such as leukemia. Individuals shall evacuate the area and notify the control room and supervisor in the event of a suspected exposure to benzene has occurred. Work Care shall be contacted to assist in the evaluation of an exposed M&O employee. Subcontractors shall follow their employees' specific exposure reporting protocols. However, Work Care is available to all subcontractors to assist in the evaluation of an exposed employee. Hydrogen sulfide, or commonly known as H2S, has the following characteristics. It is a colorless gas and may have a rotten egg or sour smell at low concentrations. At low concentrations, H2S is irritating to the eyes, skin, and lungs. At high concentrations, H2S can rapidly fatigue the sense of smell, cause respiratory paralysis, and in some cases, death from the poisoning of the nervous system or asphyxiation. H2S may also be present in sewer systems and is highly flammable. Personal protective equipment such as H2S alarms or crickets are to be worn by all individuals that conduct work within designated areas as well as during tasks identified through a hazard analysis as having the potential to expose workers to H2S. Personal H2S monitors warn the user when hydrogen sulfide gas exceeds an alarm set point. Alarm set points shall be set at 10 parts per million for the low alarm and 15 parts per million for the high alarm. Personal H2S monitors shall be worn within the worker's breathing zone, located approximately 9 to 10 inches away from the nose, and alert the wearer of the presence of H2S and prompting the individual to evacuate the area. The H2S concentration information card, which may be provided on site, outlines exposure concentration limits, actions to take, and restrictions to follow in the event an alarm or exposure has occurred. These cards should be kept with individuals at all times as a reference. Individuals shall evacuate the area for exposure at or greater than 10 parts per million. Individuals shall immediately notify the control room and their supervisor if exposed to hydrogen sulfide or if they suspect that they have been exposed to hydrogen sulfide. Work Care shall be contacted to assist in the evaluation of an exposed M&O employee. Subcontractors shall follow their employer's specific exposure reporting protocols. However, Work Care is available to all subcontractors to assist in the evaluation of an exposed employee. Exposure potentials to crude oil, brine water, benzene, and hydrogen sulfide at the SPR include, but are not limited to, drilling and workover operations, including depressurization, degas plant operations, field maintenance such as tank batteries and wells, opening of process piping or systems for maintenance, repair, sampling, or isolation, sewers and sewage treatment, utility vaults, and crude oil and brine water handling. The following charts display benzene and H2S occupational exposure limits. The SPR utilizes the ACGIH occupational exposure level in lieu of OSHA occupational exposure level for all chemicals that have ACGIH values. Displayed in this table are the respiratory protection requirements based upon the concentration present for benzene. Displayed in this table are the respiratory protection requirements based upon the concentration present for H2S. Products containing chemicals must be reviewed and approved by the New Orleans Environmental and Industrial Hygiene Departments prior to that product being brought on site. Products approved for use on the SPR can be found on the Qualified Products List, or QPL. All SPR departments and subcontractors shall follow this process and retain copies of SDSs and have these available for review at any time. The SDS shall be reviewed by all personnel utilizing any chemical equipment or product prior to use. Although the SPR no longer uses products containing asbestos or lead, there may be some materials present containing these minerals, such as floor and ceiling tile, mastic, building materials, brake shoes, thermal systems insulation, gaskets, and paints. Silica-containing materials may be used and present in the form of concrete and masonry. Although these materials may be found on the SPR, they pose little to no hazard unless disturbed or agitated. Prior to disturbing suspect asbestos-containing materials, or SACM, materials containing lead, MCl, and silica-containing materials, the suspect material will be evaluated for physical characteristics and attributes. Examination of the material in question will be based on applicable OSHA standards. The following chart displays the occupational exposure levels for these materials. Typical sources of radiation include the use of X-ray machines by site security. These machines are safe and emit permissible low levels of radiation. However, these devices may pose an issue to individuals with medical conditions, such as pacemakers. Other sources of radiation may include those used during non-destructive examination of process equipment, and established boundaries will be designated. All unauthorized personnel are to remain outside the established boundary and a safe distance away from the radiation source. Only properly trained and qualified personnel are allowed to use radiation-producing equipment or materials. The SPR has numerous types of flammable liquids, gases, and combustibles stored at each site. These include, but are not limited to, fuels, accelerants, gas cylinders, natural gases, and crude oil components. Bloodborne pathogens are an additional hazard that can be encountered. Only trained personnel shall treat, clean, or address incidents involving bodily fluids or other potentially infectious materials, or OPIM. Personnel shall observe universal precautions to prevent contact with bodily fluids or OPIM. If you or another employee have been exposed or suspected to have been exposed to OPIM or bodily fluids, immediately contact your supervisor, CRO, and work care. Work care is required to be contacted for all M&O employees, but is not required for exposed subcontract employees. However, contacting work care for subcontract employees is strongly encouraged. JHAs are required for all life-critical operations and special conditions as identified by Section 2 of the Safe Work Permit. Personnel shall ensure JHAs are developed prior to performing work when applicable. A supervisor or designee shall approve written JHAs completed by employees in their group and ensure all necessary steps were performed to develop the JHA. If changes to the work do occur, the task must be reevaluated and required changes to the JHA should be completed prior to continuing the work. A safe work permit will be issued at SPR work locations for activities that may impact operations and/or security systems to ensure adequate planning has been performed in order to conduct work safely on the SPR. Personnel who will be required to work under the safe work permit process will be provided additional safe work permit training by designated M&O personnel. Personnel shall ensure a pre-job briefing is conducted prior to execution of the work. During the pre-job briefing, the work plan shall be discussed to ensure everyone is aware of how the job will proceed and what the JHA entails. The pre-job briefing shall be documented. Life-critical operations have the greatest potential for serious injury or fatality. Life-critical operations that require a written JHA are working at heights, the use of motorized heavy equipment, material handling, confined space entry, cranes and rigging, trenching and excavations, electrical work, hazardous energy control, and motor vehicle operation. Never operate a mechanical lifting device without proper training and/or certification. If you are not certified to operate a piece of equipment, don't do it. If you are required to operate a vehicle and/or store materials, your supervisor will coordinate the proper training and/or licensing needed. Unassisted, single-person manual lifting of excessive, frequent, awkward loads or objects weighing more than 40 pounds is prohibited on the SPR except for moving personnel in emergency situations. Drivers of all vehicles shall perform a 360-degree walk-around inspection of the vehicle/equipment prior to its use to identify obstacles, hazards, and/or prior vehicle damage. Drivers will comply with the posted speed limit of 20 miles per hour if no speed limit is posted. All safety and traffic signs must be obeyed. All personnel riding in vehicles will ride inside the vehicle. Seatbelts must be worn while operating all vehicles on site. Riding in the bed of a pickup truck is forbidden unless seats designed with seatbelts are provided and passengers are riding belted in such seats. Personnel will not ride on equipment such as cranes, forklifts, and tractors unless they are equipped with an approved passenger seat. Drivers shall remain aware of pedestrian traffic at all times, including around buildings. Personnel may not drive vehicles into diked areas without first acquiring a safe work permit. Cell phone use is prohibited while driving vehicles on SPR sites. Backing mobile equipment or vehicles with trailers require a spotter. In certain locations, it may be required to back the vehicle or equipment into a parking space. All vehicle accidents will be reported to the CRO. Do not remove vehicles until the accident investigation is completed. Violation of these rules can lead to disciplinary action up to and including termination. Spotters and flaggers shall be utilized when there is an obstructed view in the direction of travel or the equipment is large enough or configured such that it blocks the view of the operator. The SPR has different types of confined spaces, and all sites have confined space locations identified throughout the sites, which include but are not limited to vaults, transformers, sumps and pits, heat exchangers, ventilation or exhaust ducts, storage tanks, which include open top, internal, and external floating roof, pig traps and piping, sewers and manholes, oil water separator units, and all confined spaces are considered to be permitted confined spaces when conducting work on the SPR. All personnel required to enter into a confined space shall receive additional training prior to occupying a confined space. Electrical hazards range from high voltage systems to low voltage systems. High voltage systems may include electrical substations with equipment, transformers, capacitors, and fuses, above ground and below ground power lines, and generators. Low voltage equipment may include pumps, miscellaneous machinery, hand tools, and electrical outlets. Only qualified persons with advanced training are permitted to work on energized electrical equipment systems or equipment. Subcontractors are responsible for ensuring their personnel are properly trained and qualified on the electrical hazards present during work that is conducted on the SPR. Personnel shall follow the SPR's Hazardous Energy Control Program for all equipment. All energy sources shall be de-energized prior to commencing work. All M&O employees exposed to hazardous energy must complete the Hazardous Energy Control course prior to performing work. All subcontract employees exposed to hazardous energy while working shall also be trained in their employer's Hazardous Energy Control Program prior to performing such work. Personnel shall be trained in the use of and limitation of required personal protective equipment or PPE. Additionally, all activities shall have a PPE hazard assessment conducted. The minimum PPE required on-site includes hard hat, ANSI approved Z87 safety glasses with permanent or approved side shields, hard toe work shoes that meet the ASTM F2412 and ASTM F2413 standards, appropriate hand protection, hearing protection in designated areas, flame-resistant clothing or FRC, and personal H2S monitors or crickets are required in designated areas. Exclusion zones, which are areas not requiring PPE unless work is being performed that requires PPE, are designated as employee, contractor, visitor parking lots, the entry portals, vehicles, walking to or from the parking lot on paved surfaces to arrive or depart from work, walking between buildings on paved sidewalks or roadway surfaces, canine training lanes, within closed cabs of heavy equipment, and in office work areas. Fire-resistant clothing or FRC is required in locations Class 1, Div 1, and 2 areas where a flash fire hazard exists or within 35 feet of a hot work activity. FRC shall be worn as the outermost layer of clothing. Site-specific maps are available at the site for review of these locations. These locations include cavern well pads, slop oil tanks, high-pressure pump pads, pig launch and receivers, crude oil transfer pumps, heat exchangers, meter skids, and areas within the vicinity of the storage tanks. FRCs may be required in additional areas as identified on safe work permits. The following is basic information on cavern workover operations and does not qualify you to perform work associated with workover operations. Visitors, those who are not directly involved with workover operations, or those who have not been granted access to workover by supervision, shall not enter a cavern workover work area unless granted permission. Due to operational processes, environmental conditions, and inherent design, workover operations have many hazards, including those that are considered life-critical. These hazards include falling objects, slips, trips, and falls, oil spills, pinch points, personal exposure to high noise and chemicals such as benzene and hydrogen sulfide, heat or cold stress, hand cut and crush hazards, and poor lighting during nighttime operations. In conclusion, we want you to remember you are empowered and have a duty to correct unsafe acts and conditions. Working together, we can prevent injuries, protect the environment, and further enhance the M&O's high standards of environmental safety and health excellence.